And if you did have any questions in the meantime, you can start chatting them in the, there's a Q&A box that you can type in, even if there's, I may be able to answer some questions that you might not have gotten answered during the main session as well. Yeah, so there's a great one talking about how early to start planning. So basically, you should talk to your advisor. Probably you can do it at the beginning of the second year to plan out your coursework, although I'm going to try to start out a program where in the fall of your second year, you can go to Rome and take 3 different mechanics courses. So if you end up, if that program goes through, then you'll want to start planning probably around the springtime. So the more early planning you can do, certainly the better, because then we can start planning exactly which classes that can count and fit into your schedule better. All right, so we do have a pretty nice web page. You can see that hopefully on this first screen, right? Can everybody see that where it says mecalpoly.edu/study abroad? So that's a really nice resource for you to be able to take a look at. And Dr. Widman talked about several of the opportunities, I think, before, where we have international exchange partners with a couple of universities in Sweden. We also have one in Munich, so the Hochschule München. The ones in red here actually where our students are going to talk, and there you can see them below the panel there. We also have one in Karlsruhe, which is over near the Black Forest, so closer to the border of France. We have one in the TECNUN in San Sebastian, Spain, as well as one in Switzerland, and then a pretty major exchange program with Swinburne. And I think, again, Dr. Widman mentioned all of those, but there's other international programs, and several of them through the CEA Study Abroad program does have other engineering courses. I know there's one in Barcelona, there's one in Madrid, there's one in Paris as well. So lots of different great opportunities for you. Now, the other thing we have is professor exchanges, and these are really cool. So basically with these, I got to do one for a full year in Munich. You can see there's a picture of me at Oktoberfest. There's one at Neuschwanstein, which is a castle that's supposedly they copied Disney World there. There's also, we did a trip into Switzerland, you can see up at the top, and then the Bavarian Alps are right there as well. And I also did a quarter-long exchange in Karlsruhe. So we swapped cars and houses and everything with those other professors. So it was really a fantastic experience. So now I am going to ask Ryan to unmute himself, and you can do more questions in the chat box that I'll be looking for. And Ryan's going to talk about his great experiences in Switzerland.
Yeah, all right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan, and the university in Switzerland is called the Lucerne University of Applied Arts and Sciences. These first 4 pictures are just kind of in the city. The top one is the view from where I was living. The top left is a view of Lake Lucerne. Bottom left is kind of in the downtown main city. There's a river that runs through it, which is pretty cool. And the bottom right is a glassblowing museum that me and my friend got to do, which was close to where we were living. So next slide. All right, so I guess I'll start with travel within Switzerland. One of the best things about Switzerland is that the train system is very good, and you can get pretty much anywhere within 4 hours. So you can go pretty much anywhere within Switzerland on a weekend. Have plenty of time, see a lot of things. All these purple flags are where I went to, and on the next slide I have just some pictures. So next slide. Yeah, so these are just a couple of the places that I was able to go. The top left is Zermatt, which is where the Matterhorn is. Got to go skiing with some friends. Top central called Engelberg. There's a lot of mountain lakes and mountain hikes and mountains in Switzerland. So if that's kind of what you like, then it's absolutely beautiful. I got to go paragliding in Interlaken. I went there like 3 times just because it was so beautiful. And you can see more lakes and cliffs and pretty things. All right, next slide. And then there's also time to travel, throughout Europe. I didn't do as much travel outside of Europe as other people have, but even with engineering work, there's plenty of opportunities to go see the major cities like Paris, Rome, um, Venice, Amsterdam, and then that little Spanish island was Menorca, and that was really fun. So next slide. And then those are the pictures of the places that I just mentioned. Yeah, I don't think I need to talk a whole lot about them. They're all cool places. You've probably heard of them all. So I think the last slide. So a little bit about the engineering. This bottom central picture is kind of a picture of the school. You're going to school in like the middle of just incredibly beautiful nature, which is like one of my favorite parts about it. And this bottom right picture is all the other students from Cal Poly I got to go with and be in classes with. This is actually when we were back in the US. We had to take finals and during winter quarter, so we were all studying together. So that was a lot of fun. And if you're interested in kind of energy-based classes and technical electives, I know it's pretty early for you guys to be thinking about concentrations, maybe not, but the Lucerne University in Switzerland has a lot of energy-based classes, learning about different forms of energy and how we can utilize it. They're very big on clean energy as well. And then there's other really good engineering classes to be taken there. They have a cool kind of design room where you can make a bunch of prototypes and designs and experiment with things. I was actually able to do my first quarter of senior project abroad in Switzerland. And part of that was made possible because they had project classes in classrooms where I could work on that project. And yeah, I think that's the biggest things about my experience.
Great.
Super fun. Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. And he's going to stick around for questions as well. And you can even start in the Q&A box if you like now. So I'm going to pass it over to Ivet, who's going to talk about her time in Spain.
I was muted. Okay, to start again. So my name is Ivet Avalos, and I did my study abroad in San Sebastian. So this was this past fall. And yeah, so San Sebastian is located in like the north region of Spain, and it's culturally really different from the rest of Spain. It's part of the Basque country. So they actually speak Spanish and Basque, which was kind of a little bit of cultural variation. So I speak Spanish. It's like my native language. So going to Spain was kind of a good step for me where I wouldn't be like in total culture shock because I couldn't communicate with anybody, but I was also able to improve my Spanish. And I really wanted to focus on improving my technical Spanish because although I could speak it, I didn't feel comfortable speaking it in a engineering basis. So that was really a great step for me. So yeah, this is a beautiful view of San Sebastian. There's an amusement park. This is where this was taken, and that's all kind of the city. It's like a mid-sized city, and Basque culture is kind of one of the oldest cultures in Europe. So it's really interesting to have that exposure. Next slide. Next slide.
There may just be a little delay. It should pop up here in a second. You see the
Perfect. Yeah, got it. So I attended TECNUN, which is the engineering campus that is part of the University of Navarra. So we all did global exchanges, it sounds like, and global exchange is really like a cool and different opportunity from a lot of other study abroad experiences in that you go with some Cal Poly students, but you don't only hang out with Cal Poly students. So at my school, there was 40 international students from all over the world. That's kind of that picture in the left side. And since we're all there just for a short term, it's really easy to make friends like from all over the world. I honestly think I have free housing in Europe anytime I can go now. And it was really interesting going to just an engineering campus because they had a whole research facility. So I was able to kind of have exposure to, smaller class sizes and a lot of like the cool technology that they have. So those two are some of the projects that I worked on. I took a biorobotics and biomechanics course. So that picture in the bottom left, bottom right, was kind of, we were putting markers on a subject, then we were analyzing how their leg moved with different MATLAB codes. And then the top picture was a CNC program that we did to create this like flower that we had modeled on Creo. So that was a really cool hands-on experience. Next. Yeah, and then for me, I really wanted to focus on traveling. I'd never traveled alone. I've always just traveled with my family. So it was my first time in Europe, and I really wanted to have a big focus on traveling. And Oktoberfest in Munich was kind of my big major trip. So I was done with like a couple other students from Cal Poly, and these are just kind of an array of pictures from the event. And that was actually a really cool opportunity because on one of the days, I guess every Cal Poly student decided to go to Munich on the same weekend. So at some point there was like 30 Cal Poly students all together in Munich, which was just like an incredible experience after being in Spain with people you didn't know, just being surrounded by like, your people back home in a different like continent. So that was a really cool experience. Yeah, next slide. And then my next trip was Paris. So as I said, San Sebastian was really close to France. And I actually took French for a couple years in high school. So wanting to travel in France was also a big part for me to study in this city. So going to Paris, I got to see all these things that I'd like learned about for so long in high school. I did pretty much every major thing that you could have done in Paris. And I actually stayed a day after when my friends left. And so kind of to ease myself into traveling, I wanted to start trying to travel solo. So the last day I stayed alone and I really loved it, which kind of fueled my future travels. And I even got to like try out my French a little. I actually didn't forget everything. So that was a great experience. And although Paris gets kind of a pretty bad rap about having people hate the tourists, I had some really good feedback and like people were always really helping to like improve my French. So that was a fantastic experience for me. Next slide. And kind of with that, my next trip, I really wanted to push myself even further. So I did my full trip, my first solo trip to Portugal. I kind of jammed a ton. It was like a 4-day trip. So I went to Porto, Lisbon, and Sintra, and this is just kind of an array of all of it. And it was my first solo trip. I stayed at some wonderful hostels and got to meet people from all over the world. And anybody who goes abroad or just travels, I highly recommend staying in hostels. It's so much easier to meet people with different backgrounds and everybody's there to travel and have fun. So it's like the best case scenario to meet people. So that was probably one of my favorite trips just because I got to meet so many people. Next slide. And then these are just some pictures from my Bruges, Belgium trip. It was a very chill, like right after midterms, just gonna go eat some waffles, look at some cute, cool views. And this is kind of like the last major trip. Yeah, it was a pretty chill one. And then next slide. And then I did a lot of traveling within Spain. The last 2 weeks, my mom and my brother actually came up. You can kind of see them in my, that's a picture from New Year's. So we traveled all around Spain. We went to all the major cities and along with some with my friends. And one of the really cool experiences from that was Montserrat, which is that like rock picture at the bottom. It's a monastery that's up in the mountains and it was a very like unique experience. And then of course, just in abroad, like the main experience is all the people that you meet. That top corner is a bunch of the international students, just kind of our last night out, really saying our goodbyes. The goodbyes were something else when next time you'll see each other, we'll probably be in a different country. But it was a fantastic experience. And then the last slide just kind of shows the Cal Poly students I went with. You really, since they're the ones that you're going to share the experience with and get to reflect on them lately, you guys get really close. That top picture is actually also back in the US. We did a trip to Big Sur together and just kind of got together there. Yeah, that was my study abroad experience. Definitely recommend.
Super. Thanks so much, Yvette. So I'm going to now have Morgan join in and unmute himself, and Yvette will also be here at the end for questions.
Alrighty. My name is Morgan. I studied abroad in Munich. This picture behind me is actually in Zurich, Switzerland. I have like a little caption with the location on all my slides, in case you're wondering. Next slide, please. So I studied in Munich, which is in South Germany, which is also known as Bavaria. It's very different from Northern Germany, like Berlin. They're very, very, very different environments. Munich is probably my favorite city in Europe out of all the ones that I ended up visiting. It's like super clean, which is incredible compared to every other city I went to. I think Munich was the cleanest city. And when you're out and about, you'll see them like going through with street sweepers and stuff. It's amazing. So if you like cleanliness, Munich is a great place. Next slide, please. So Munich's pretty cool. It is the home of Oktoberfest. This photo is not from Oktoberfest. It's actually from Springfest. I don't know why it's moving, but anyways, I basically, yeah, we can go to the next slide. It's done. That's from Springfest, which is in the springtime. It's basically the counterpart of Oktoberfest. So our Munich exchange program is typically done during spring quarter, and you won't be there for Oktoberfest unless you decide to like skip fall quarter, but you'll be there for Springfest, which is in late March. It's a great time. It's the exact same thing as Oktoberfest, but with a lot fewer tourists and a lot more German speakers. So if you want like that closer to home environment, that's really nice. This photo here from Tutzing is actually just south of Munich. You can get there on the S-Bahn, which is like the suburban train. It goes just outside the city. It was maybe like an hour by train to get here. And I actually did a backpacking trip. So that's where this photo is from. A few of my friends decided to go backpacking. There's a lot of beer gardens in Germany. So we hiked from one beer garden to another beer garden they're like right next to a lake. So we went from one lake to the other. That was really fun. Next slide, please. This is, which is in the south of Germany. This is the German Alps right here. I went snowboarding here. It's a beautiful city. You can get there for like less than 50 euros, and that includes your lift ticket and the train ride. So super great experience. Munich is very central to everything. That's a big advantage of studying there. Next slide, please. One of the big trips I took, I made a lot of friends outside of Cal Poly students. There were 17 students from Cal Poly on my exchange program, but that was a really big group. But my friends from across the world, we went together to Croatia, and we did a big like week-long trip in Croatia. So we went to the Plitvice like Lakes and National Park, which is the left and bottom right picture, which is just a bunch of waterfalls and trails, just a gorgeous country overall. I really recommend visiting Croatia. It's a great place to vacation. Next slide, please. I don't know if this will play, but yeah, you can cliff jump in Croatia. That's pretty cool. There's lots of fun things you can do while you're abroad. Next slide. We're good. So in Budapest, this is another great place that I think everyone visits. So these were like my two big trips, Croatia and Budapest, I would say, that I did with a group. My next slide will be about my solo travel, which I really recommend everyone has that solo experience while you're abroad. It's really great to like learn more about who you are and like just meeting people in general. I think this is where I met the most people because you leave your comfort zone. You don't really have anyone to hang out with. You just go out randomly and just start talking to people. So I went to Paris. That was a 16-hour bus ride from Munich to Paris. So that was fun. It saves money on hotels. If you take an overnight bus, you can get your sleep on the bus and then not have to pay for the hostel when you get there in the morning. So I did that a few times. Went from Paris to Amsterdam to Brussels and then back to Munich again. So super nice. And I think that might be it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. So we do have plenty of time for questions, and we've got a small group, so I can probably even like if you all raise your hand and don't want to type but want, I think I can unmute you if you have a microphone. So Caitlin, Jolene, Kelsey, or Silas, if you've got some questions you want to ask any of our panelists or me, then you should be able to like raise a virtual hand, and then we can try to answer your questions. Okay, so there's Caitlin has one about the what is the process to study abroad. So do one of you all want to answer that part? What types of processes and what you had to go through to do it, and kind of when you did it? Go ahead, Morgan.
Yeah, I can speak on that. So I was interested in study abroad when I applied to Cal Poly. That was just something that I had always wanted to do. And I kind of investigated a little my first year and really started looking into it my second year, probably fall quarter, second year is when I started getting invested in the Munich application. We have the abroad.calpoly website, and they'll like tell you all about, you know, what kind of forms you have to fill out and stuff like that. There's just a checklist that'll say like, hey, you need to attend this educational class, which is like an hour during a free block in your schedule. It's really easy to do that. And then from there, you just fill out the online application, and the abroad office accepts or declines you, and you kind of get rolling from there. It's very well explained.
And then I can help you with your schedule to look, and we'll find out the, kind of what classes they offer at the different universities that you might be interested in. So, but a lot of the students just were able to go online and pretty much do it on their own. And then the Munich one, like we said, is typically done in the spring, whereas the other two that we just talked about are usually done in the fall. It's because most other schools are on the semester system versus the quarter system. So it just lines up. So you still pay Cal Poly tuition when you do these specific programs. There's an additional like $400 fee, but you can also still get financial aid. Some of the programs have scholarships. So, and then usually the other locations in Europe tend to be a little bit cheaper than San Luis Obispo. And then finally, you don't have to buy books at most of those places. Did any of you all have to buy textbooks, or was it all the scriptum type of thing?
I didn't have to buy any books. They handed out the scripts in Munich, and my housing actually ended up being about half the cost of my housing in San Luis Obispo.
Yeah, I had to buy like one book, but it was like $15. It was not the textbooks here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just like workbooks and stuff. So not bad.
Right. Nice. Okay, more questions. Okay, well, so Dr. Widman's going to do an overall Q&A session. He's going to start that at 4:15 now. You might be able to jump into other sessions as well. Feel free to email me. My email address is there on the screen. Right, you all can still see that? And then some of the websites that Morgan had mentioned, one is the ME specific one, and it'll list a bunch of the different places that we have the specific exchanges with, and then a couple of those other CEA types of programs that I mentioned before. There's also just the overall international program office there, that international.calpoly.edu, that you can also go through and find some interesting information. So my wife and I love doing the exchange. As you can see, all three of these students had a fantastic time. They've got, like they were saying, probably places to stay now and friends in Europe whenever they want to travel abroad. And it just really opens up your eyes. So you can usually get at a minimum, and you have to take at least 12 units when you go to be full time. I don't know how many kind of degree applicable ones you all got. Do you know how many units you were able to take during that time abroad?
Yeah, I took 12 like technical elective units.
Okay. Morgan, what'd you do?
I took 8 units actually, but then I was in 12 because I also was enrolled in an online class through Foothill Community College. So I was doing a GE with them, and then 2 core classes.
Okay, great. And Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I think I ended up getting around 10 tech elective credits, and then yeah, I was in like a local Swiss culture class and German speaking class, which counted for more units.
Okay. So there is a question, I might get each of you to answer these as well, but the International Center does have arrangements with different international offices at the different schools, so they'll help with housing. But there's a question in the box there. So Yvette, can you start out answering? So they're asking, is it easy to make housing arrangements prior to going, or do you do it once you get there? So how did you find your place to live?
So for mine, everybody I know that went from Cal Poly did it ahead of time, but I know some students like stayed in a hostel for a couple of days and did it once they were there just because it was easier to like look for housing. So it's kind of like whatever you're comfortable with. It depends on the school. Our school gave us like some links, but they weren't really helpful for me. But my friend redirected me like Erasmus housing, which is Erasmus is like the study abroad program across Europe. And I was able to get housing through there. And it seemed more reliable to me because at least in Spain, housing is a lot more like chill. Like they like didn't have a lease. Like it was like very different than housing here where they do like a background check and stuff. So just be prepared for that as far as like studying abroad in Spain. It's really different. So if you do it like there, it's not like you're doing it last minute. I think I stressed more about housing than I probably should have.
Morgan, how about you?
In Munich, there's actually a raffle for student housing, but it's not like student housing at Cal Poly where like you live on campus. Student housing in Germany is actually like a private industry that owns like a bunch of apartment complexes just around cities where there are colleges. And it's just like cheaper housing for students. But I basically entered into a raffle for that before I left. And I got the results of that maybe a month or so before I left for Munich. You get the results of whether or not you did get housing. Everyone from Cal Poly got student housing, which was really great, really affordable, and within like a reasonable distance to the university. And some of the students who were not from Cal Poly had to find their own housing because they didn't get in the raffle. And it wasn't super difficult per se, but they were a little bit farther outside the city and they had a much longer commute to classes.
Great, thanks, Morgan. And we've got a really tight connection with the Munich University of Applied Sciences, so that's typically the case that they kind of give us some priority, I think, there. And Ryan, how'd you get your housing?
Housing was super well coordinated by the people in Lucerne. They essentially sent out a housing form with your different preferences, and you don't really know much about them other than like single or double and like the size of the room. But housing was super easy, at least getting it secured. In Switzerland, there's a lot of like bureaucratic processes that you have to go through. So there's a lot just like getting permits, yeah, making sure you're where you're supposed to be and like paying the right people. I actually didn't get my housing permit until like 2 weeks before I left,
Yeah.
just because it was like a super long process.
And how about
yeah,
your visa? How about your visa?
Visa, you get that before. That's kind of confusing, or it was for me. But you just gotta start it early, and I know I think if you Google Swiss visa, they have a web page that kind of directs you to the different steps you have to take and the documents you need. But yeah, that's one thing about Switzerland is there's a lot of paperwork and processes. So kind of like the US, I'd imagine.
Caitlin and Silas, any more questions? And our International Center gives you some help, but some of the other things like with the visas, they'll try to point you to some other sites in general, I think. Yvette and Morgan, how did you have difficulties getting your visas?
The German visa, you don't need a visa for the first 90 days you're in Germany. You can just enter and you're welcome to stay for 90 days. If you're staying any length beyond that, then you have to have a visa. So I have like a German like sticker in my book, a visa, saying that I'm a German student. But for Munich, like Germany's a little weird. You have to register that you're living in the city. I still need to deregister. There's an issue with that, but technically I'm still living in Munich. But you have to like register with the city. That's a big process you have to do there. And you have to go into what's called the KVR. And that's like going to the DMV. It's not pleasant at all. And the German government actually runs all of their computers on, I think, Windows Vista. They like haven't updated all of them. So it's like really slow. It takes them forever to do everything. And then it's like the same process for your visa, which is a separate process that you have to do after you've like registered in the city.
Yeah, it was kind of a pain to do the visa. Like, there's a lot of little things on all the websites. I would really recommend trying to find somebody who studied abroad like the year before and asking them the process. Like, I know for the Spanish one, like, you have to log on like at noon because that's when like 90 days ahead, like the slot opens and they fill up really fast. And we didn't know that for like the first like 3 months that we were trying to get an appointment. So once we figured that out, it was like pretty easy. So yeah, I would just recommend like talking to like the broad office is good, but it's better to talk to a student that just went through it because like they understand the struggle a little bit more. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, it was a pain for me. I had to go through all that stuff during my times as well. So the Munich one was a little easier because they took me to the KVR, and actually one of the the people who worked in that international office, and they kind of walked us through it. So that made it a lot easier. But mine was a work permit. We're there for a full year, and my wife was getting a work permit, and so yeah, it is definitely a process. Okay, well, certainly thank you so much, Ivet, Morgan, and Ryan. Silas, if you have any other questions, certainly don't hesitate to contact me or the ME office, and we can help you out, or just come visit when you get to San Luis Obispo. All right, thanks so much, everybody. Take care of that, Morgan, Ryan. Stay healthy.